Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Welcome back to another edition of the Advancement Podcast. I am
Quarantine
Todd Barham.
edition.
Quarantine edition. I'm Todd Barham here again with the great, magnificent Tim Ware.
You say that, you always say that, and then you call me old and make fun of me. So I'm not sure which part of you I should believe.
Well, Gandalf the Great, he had gray hair too. So, reaching down deep into my nerddom with that, but
okay. I love Tolkien. I'm a big Tolkien fan.
Oh,
so.
yeah. Or is it Tolkien or Tolkien? Which one of those guys are you?
Okay. Here we go. It's great to have Justing Trapp back with us.
Welcome back, Justin.
Hey,
I haven't seen you in 30 seconds.
The benefits of recording episodes in one setting and then dumping them out over a few days, right?
I actually had a wardrobe change between episodes, so I'm good now.
Yeah.
We used to actually do that during our episodes. We would change.
I'm glad we don't.
Yeah. Well, the emphasis was more on the video side at that time. And, Justin was talking about content and measurements, and our metrics said we were getting much more on the audio. So,
Hey, I had my makeup person come in between though, so I'm good to go.
That's good because I have a face for radio. So,
well, you're in the right place now, man.
Yeah.
So, I was just so. I had so many notes I took from our last conversation, Justin. So we're going to continue our conversation. For those of you, if you didn't hear our first episode, go back and listen to yesterday's, because what we did is we're talking about sermon prep. We're talking about the sermon delivery. We're talking about doing this in online. Justin is co-founder of Ministry Pass and Seminary, and these are content and sermon and preaching tools. They're designed to help you with sermon series and help you in your development of your sermons. And so this is right up his alley.
Yeah.
And
I need to give Seminary a chance. I'm an Evernote guy. I've never ventured into the Seminary world.
you should try it. You gotta try. Write one sermon and then use Podium Mode. Well, you use a teleprompter, I think so. But you try out Podium Mode. People that use Podium Mode are like, I get it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Podium Mode, is it on Seminary?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Do y'all, when I looked it up, y'all didn't have an app yet. Do you have an app now?
We have a desktop app.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a desktop app. Now, it's a web app, so you can use Podium Mode from your phone.
Yeah.
It's not an offline. So at our church plant, we meet in a high school, and sometimes the Wi-Fi is sketchy. So what a lot of times I'll do is just before I walk in the doors at the school, I'll load it on my phone on my browser.
Uh-huh.
And then once it loads on the browser, you're good. As long as you don't need to make changes to your sermon at the last moment.
Yeah.
And if you have the desktop app, it's offline. But you need to use it on your laptop or your desktop.
Why don't you give
a mobile app?
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and give everybody a plug for Seminary? We want to make sure and do that for our listeners.
Sure. We have two platforms. One is called Seminary, and it's a cloud-based sermon writing platform. And what we had realized is that pastors were writing, 86% of pastors were writing their sermons on Microsoft Word pages, and like Todd said, Evernote. Some are writing by hand. And we just wondered, is there another way? Because a lot of times when you're writing a message in Word, you're having to write from north to south, just straight down the page in a linear fashion. And there's so many times where I've wanted to move things around, and Word just doesn't allow you a lot of agility. And to be honest, it does 10,000 things that have nothing to do with a sermon. So we created something called Seminary, which is a platform specifically built, and all of the features and all of the things that pastors like, centering around building and constructing a sermon. So we launched that about 2.5 years ago. To date, we've had over 75,000 sermons written on the platform. So it's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Excellent. And then there's Ministry Pass also.
Ministry Pass, we're a sermon series creator. So I was a bivocational pastor. And, I was serving at a church. I was executive pastor, and I was preaching twice a month. And I got, there's so many other responsibilities. You have to wear so many hats being a pastor. And one of the things that I realized is that I was not having enough time towards a lot of the creative elements, some of the graphics needed for my, my sermon series and my message. So what I did was we set out to create something that could really, really help that small church pastor. So we've created, we have about 1,000 sermon series. We have a sermon series in every book of the Bible, of course, a lot of topics as well. And pastors can get not only the media, the bumper videos, the graphics for their passages and their points, and social media and all of that, but also the content framework. So we're not giving pastors a transcript per se, or even an outline. We're giving them sort of the big idea of the message, the passages they can use, some talking point ideas, and maybe some illustrations ideas. The rest of the sermon, the rest of that 85%, they have to develop through their own unique voice, but at least they do have that framework to start with.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, that's cool. So we'll continue our conversation about this transition that's been thrust upon the church to go from meeting in rooms to meeting online. Last time you mentioned pastors not being uncomfortable. Not being comfortable in front of the camera, that they don't know they're not comfortable until all of a sudden that's all they've got is this camera sitting in front of them.
Yeah.
So you've talked about you mentioned using a teleprompter, and you told us about Prompt Smart, this app. So how can you help guys that say, well, what do I do to get comfortable? What do I need to do communication wise to communicate this way?
Well, if you're a pastor and this is new for you, sort of recording, talking into the camera to preach your message, like a lot of pastors are in this season, I can tell you, I feel your pain. I feel that awkwardness because I've been that myself. And it's an experience that feels isolated, perhaps lonely, if you will, that you don't have the audience to amen, or you don't hear the laughter when you tell a joke that at the beginning of your sermon that really kind of warms you up. There's no warm up when you're just recording to a camera.
Right.
And so I think if I had any advice for pastors, I would say try to internalize your notes as best as possible. Please don't preach a 45-minute message talking to the camera in this season. Try to condense it. Don't feel the pressure to do that. But
okay, let's just hold on right there. I think that's a point to stop, because that's one of the things I've said to guys is if you do 45 minutes, I've recommended that they cut everything by 30%, somewhere between 30 to 50%. But that's my number. What would you say?
I would agree with that. A sermon can be entertaining, it can be compelling, it can be inspiring, it can be convicting, but a lot of that happens in person. And that's not to say that can't happen watching a video from your home while your pastor's preaching, but there's just so much more going on at home. And there's so much more, so many more distractions, whether your kid's running around, dropping toys, a baby crying, whatever the case may be.
Sitting on the couch with your Cheerios while they're preaching.
So
I wouldn't know nothing about that.
Did you watch my sermon with Cheerios, Tim?
Man.
No, I was actually sitting doing a puzzle while yours was on. I probably watched 10 sermons this past week. So
I'm glad I was that interesting that you could do a puzzle.
I'm sorry. Didn't mean to break the mood there.
It's fine. I'll do better this week, Tim. Just for you.
But I think there is a reality that people are going to be doing stuff. So when they're not sitting in a chair in front of you, trying to deliver a 35 or 40-minute message. One pastor said, I recorded it, and I normally preach with like 35 minutes, and it only took 20 minutes. And I said, that's the difference in an audience feeding back to you.
Yeah. I was shorter this week too, but our overall service, usually it's about 75 minutes. And we were just this week, start to finish, we were just under an hour, with worship and offering and everything. And so I think we do underestimate how much having the people there in front of you adds to the service. And when we're just delivering pure content, it's not as much.
Yeah, well, if an audience is laughing at my jokes more than they normally are, I'm feeling a lot more confident, and I'm starting to talk more.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I'm starting to say more because of that confidence, and so I think just being in front of a group in general can lengthen and any service. Now, let's say this: if you're a church and you have the means to, I'm not saying churches. There's anything wrong with churches doing this, but if you have the means and you can record your worship, and the pastor can stand on stage and record it, and you guys can do it in a way that's meaningful and it connects, then more power to you. 3 weeks ago, a lot of churches in America were not streaming whatsoever, and now they're forced with this dilemma of like, how do we do this and what does it look like? And there's a lot of pressure to do it like Andy Stanley or Elevation Church, and theirs looks amazing and it's on TV, or and they have multiple streams going, and they have all these MCs and it looks awesome. And I just hope that churches don't succumb to that pressure, that do something that is within your capabilities, and do something that could be even outside the box. This is just such a wonderful opportunity for churches to go, you know what, how can we just take a step back and go, how can we minister to the gospel on these online platforms, on these social media platforms, and do it in a way that people are used to consuming content on these platforms. It's anytime you have something like this, something that's disruptive, innovation always rises. Innovation always comes to the top. And so don't feel like you have to do business as usual, because it isn't business as usual. And people that try to pretend that it's business as usual are in that first stage of grief.
One of our I
love that.
That's awesome. One of our mantras here on the advancement team is, when we work with churches, is we tell them that you need to create a laboratory environment. You need to be you need to be able to test things, and if it's not working, move it, and those kind of things. This is a great time to do it. So
I've got a staff meeting this afternoon, and that's what I really want to talk to them about. What do we want to test that we wouldn't test any other time than this? And we may just find we hit the jackpot with the thing we've been wanting to do all the time, just never had a chance to try it.
Well, and people are going to be so forgiving in this season too, right?
Oh, yeah.
You could fall flat on your face, and people are like, well, we just found butter for the first time in 7 days, so doesn't matter.
Well, and let's just be honest, they're so bored that, anything that's on there, like, well, I mean, I'm watching TV shows that are from, like, the thing I'm watching right now is an Ultimate Fighter from 2014, because I can't find anything else that's interesting right now.
There's no new sports.
There's nothing. And so, they're going to be a little bit more forgiving because they're so bored out of their mind. But Tim, I was teaching my son to shoot a BB gun in the backyard.
I did see that on Facebook. I did see that you were doing that. So that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Too bad we're quarantined. Otherwise, I'd say come to my house. I'll keep you on board. But that's
Well, I could sneak out of the county while they're not looking.
You want to come dig fence posts and string barbed wire? I got a place for you.
I'm worried about getting sick. I just want to stay home right now.
So Justin, one of the things that I think that there's a couple things opportunity wise. Number one, we talked about people sitting in their home and the audience being different. Right now, the audience probably reflects, it's more like the unchurched world than it is the churched world.
Yeah.
And we've already seen in this first week that there were in a lot of churches, there was an uptick in people who were responding to the gospel.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that I'd love for you to kind of talk through. Let's talk through number one. Let's just talk about the practical stuff of setting the stage and some things we could test. Again, I've recommended if people are sitting on their couch, then maybe you should. I mean, obviously, you said if you can do it on screen, do it on stage and do it well, but don't feel the pressure. where I'm recording now at the crossing place, this pastor said, you know what? I'm trying to figure out how to get a microphone down to the little island on the lake behind my house, and I'm gonna do my sermon from there because I can.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I would love to see that sermon.
Yeah. Yeah, and the main reason we're doing our sermons here in the church is, we don't really want to move all our gear. We have a pretty extensive live setup. We could do it from different parts of the sermon or different parts of the sanctuary of the building, but moving it somewhere else would just be like, and a lot of it's pretty expensive too.
Well, but I think the reason I bring that up is because most churches in America are still in this under 100. You're at a 300 plus church. You've invested in that. But with these smaller churches, they're the ones that if they don't have the equipment to do that, this is the time for them to experiment, in my opinion.
The easiest way to do stuff online is to get you a microphone like this on Amazon, or even they make the ones that just plug straight into your phone, or you get your headphones that come with your Apple phone and record a live video that way. That is almost just as high quality of a video as anybody else is using. In fact, I saw Stephen Furtick today. You talked about Stephen Furtick. He was sitting at his computer doing a Facebook live stream, and he didn't even know how to work it because he'd never done it before. Stephen Furtick. He was sitting on there texting his team because he didn't know how to respond to people on Facebook Live. I was like, yes, I beat Stephen Furtick at something.
Tim, you said something, and I want to go back to that for a moment if we can. And you talked about how the audience now is probably more unchurched than every church's audience right now has expanded.
Yeah,
that's right.
We noticed after 9/11, for weeks and weeks, churches were flooded, largest attendance ever. Here in Houston, when we had the space shuttle go down, man, it was many years ago.
You were very young then, sir.
There was one over Huntsville that blew up.
Columbia. What is it? Columbia?
Yeah, he was still pretty young.
No, it was one like 10 years ago. It wasn't the one that, I know which one you're referring to.
I was in high school when it happened. So it was about almost 20 years ago, 18, 20 years ago.
Yeah, so I was like 16, 17.
Yeah. Tim was still old.
Churches were filled, at least in Houston, because that happened right north of us, about an hour north of us. Churches were filled then. Churches would be filled now, guys.
Absolutely, they will.
But they can't because of the nature of it. So there is a audience ripe. And so if you're a pastor, yes, have your normal service where you're getting together, but I think this is a great opportunity for you to, if you're an unchurched person and you're a single mom and you haven't been to church in a long time or never been to church, but you're dealing with possibly losing your job, trying to take care of your family, provide for them, can't find butter, bread. I mean, we laughed about it, but at the same time, if you're in this situation, it's no fun, right? And the grocery stores are crowded. What can you as a pastor and as a church say to that single mom in this season? And is a 45-minute sermon or an hour and a half stream of your service really going to be what she needs to hear? Or perhaps could you do a devotional, a 5-minute devotional, and you could start out with, hey, maybe you've been in the season and you're afraid and you've been stressed out and you possibly might lose your job through this and you don't know where to turn. Let me take the next few moments and share with you a few things that God's word teaches about us about these moments and how we can respond. That's going to mean so much to her or to those types of people than a stream of your service. So I'm not saying we can't have a stream. Yes, for sure, because you still have your congregation to sort of lead. But in this season, in this moment, make sure that you don't forget about all those other eyeballs that could potentially be on your social media profiles.
I think that is, to me, that's where my burden has been, is the harvest. I mean,
he's been preaching that to me nonstop since this happened.
I've preached it to everybody that this is, in my lifetime, I'm going to just tell you, I was active in the church. I was working and leading in the church during 9/11 and even back when in the shuttle crisis, I was a leader in the church. And what I can tell you is we wasted those opportunities.
Yeah.
At 9/11, we became angry Americans, and we did not respond with the hope that we needed to. This may be the greatest evangelistic moment in the last 100 years, maybe longer than that, possibly in the entire history of the globe, because of mass media and the things we can do. Yeah. It's obviously a time of great fear because of mass media, but we have the opportunity for hope. I saw one pastor, he was very intentional. He had planned a great wrap up to his sermon where there was an opportunity for people to respond for salvation but the way his live stream was set up, the clock ran out on it, and it ran out before he gave instructions on how to contact them. I was like, oh, no.
That's rough.
No. Yeah. I think this is just an opportunity. I'm so glad you said that. The audience is bigger, and we've got to be aware. I think that's the piece for me, Justin, when we think about sermon prep and think about this I think a lot of our pastors are going into this video moment thinking their audience is the same they've had all along, and that's not true.
Yeah, that was made. I'm trying to collect my thoughts here. We're recording live. That was made evident to me on Sunday. I set up just a simple through a texting platform. I set up just a simple response number. And we set up a online form through Planning Center. And if anybody's interested in doing that, I can show you in like 5 seconds. Just send me an email, pastortodd@hopechurchcleveland.com. And basically, we just had them fill out a simple digital response form. And I had like 6 people respond to a decision. I can't tell you the last time in a live service I've had that many respond in one service. And these are people that have not been connected. 1 or 2 had not been connected to our church in a long time, and the rest had never been connected to our church. And so I was just floored at how many people were just watching from just because we're online. And I think I think you're right, Tim. This is our moment that if this prolongs any longer, I think all it's going to do is just turn the temperature up of people looking for a church. And I think also, Tim, one of the discussions that we might have later on in the quarantined edition is that we need to be prepared for when these people actually want to come visit our church when all this is over.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to get to at another day. So Justin, you look like you were wanting to throw something in there on that.
Well, I'm just thinking through, like, if you're a pastor, and you're a church and you have multiple maybe personalities contributing to the content each week, perhaps we need to retrain ourselves in the way that we talk in this season. If we're having a lot of unchurched people, if we're having a lot of people that don't go to your church in particular, you can't assume anything. And so, yes, you still want to be familiar and warm to your church congregation, but perhaps we might need to consider the new types of people that are going to be watching that have never been to your church. They literally have never been, and they found you online, and they might be from Ohio, or from Florida, and they don't know God, but they're afraid. And this is a great moment for your church to minister to them from around the world. Technology is a wonderful thing. I heard my son's heartbeat for the first time from Madagascar. My wife announced to me she was pregnant on Good Friday. 2 weeks later, I left for a trip to Madagascar, and for like 2 of the days out of that trip, I had Wi-Fi in this one particular area, and it just so happened that she was having her ultrasound appointment while I was halfway around the world. And thank you to FaceTime, Steve Jobs, and Apple, I was able to hear my son's heartbeat halfway around the world. And I think it's an important moment for us as the church to realize that people are all around the world right now, and let them hear God's heartbeat to them from wherever they are, not just from your church, but really, from anywhere in this season.
And it was just as impactful to hear it over the internet as it was being right there, wasn't it?
1000%.
Yeah.
That preaches pretty good right there, Justin.
I'm writing a message on Seminary right now.
Well, I'd love for us to, if you have time, Justin, I'd love for us to do one more and us talk some more about some of the practical things that we can do, because as we begin to shift our communication, shift our audience, it also means we probably shift the way we prepare, because even preparing for this type of message is different than preparing the way we've done it for decades or years or whatever it is. So I'd love for us to talk through that in our next episode
on the Advancement Podcast Quarantine Edition.
Yeah. So Todd, what's your takeaway here, Bo?
You know, I've already had this burning on my heart, but it's my takeaway from this conversation, just because I want our listeners to I want it to land home with them, that this is a big opportunity for us and the church. I read an article, and I'll give a shameless plug to Influence Magazine, that talked about, one of the earliest, in the earliest parts of the Pentecostal movement was the Spanish flu. And we've talked about this in other episodes, but the article said that it truly believed, because the church was so loving and caring for the world at that time, that was probably one of the things that sparked the movement of the Pentecostal movement around the world quickly after all that happened. And I think we have a big moment here in history to reach people that are hurting and need hope, and we need to do it, and we need to seize the opportunity and not let this go by, even if that means we have to put in a little bit more hours during this time than we want to. God is going to be honored, and his kingdom is going to be pushed forward because he's given us this opportunity.
Absolutely. For my entire life, people have talked about a end time revival, you know, and, I am 20 years older than both of you guys almost. And in that time, the reality is there's no time in history where the global society has been disrupted other than maybe World War II.
Yeah.
The way this has disrupted our society. Mm-hmm. And we have an opportunity. I just believe that I believe that this is a shaking moment for the church and the world, and we have to seize the moment.
Yeah.
All right. So quarantine edition of the Advancement Podcast.
Yeah, we'll see you next time.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.